just wanted to talk about, this revelation I guess I've had. Well, not really a revelation, but a nice analogy that, each gaming generation is like walking through a desert. And each game is, how much water you have, how wet are you, and how well you can survive. So, if you were to ask me right now, what's the status? It's 2019. I'd say it's decent. We've got enough water to sustain us, but I think we're just passing, that point where we're not too thirsty. 2019 was the year I thought it was going to be. We got Code Vein, we got Smash, we got Death Stranding. Finally, it actually came out and wasn't stuck in development hell for what I thought would be years. What else did we get? We got, what's up for Game of the Year? I feel like I'm forgetting something important. Oh, whatever. Doesn't matter. But the point is that, we're getting pretty well hydrated. But you compare it to, a few years ago. So we're going into Gen 9 now. You compare this to Gen 7, especially Gen 6. Everyone was wet. Oh, they were so wet. We were fine. We were like living in a tropical paradise. It wasn't a question of, did you have enough water? It's like, what type do you want? Who has the best water? It was between Sony, I think specifically Gen 6 now, where you had Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, and it's always like everyone had their exclusives. And it wasn't a big deal back then. I was like, yeah, Final Fantasy is on PlayStation. That's just how it is. But now you have, it's kind of like, oh, well, if something's on PlayStation, it's always on Xbox. Wasn't always the case. And it's a question of, well, who are you going to go with? You're going to go with the guy who was the water and maybe a bit of white wine on the side, maybe a little bit of red wine. And Nintendo's got some fruit juice there. It's like, that's fun. It's kind of kiddie, but hey, I like fruit juice. I like, a little passion fruit, straw cup, whatever. It's nice. But beginning of this gen, it was pretty dry. I was talking to my brother. It was pretty dry. We both got to admit, and it's getting better, but it's definitely not. It's a shadow of what it used to be. When you got that game that really sells your console, because I don't know. I get this thing that we the way we got on this topic is that we were talking about Stadia. And the thing about Stadia is that it positioned itself as a service for games that people already had or would come out. But the issue was that you don't have that killer IP. You don't have, yes, it's impressive. You can stream and, you don't have to buy discs or anything, it's subscription, whatever. But why are people going to come to you? And I feel like game companies don't understand. It's got to have that wet, that moist, that delicious, that killer IP video app. That's just, it's just oozing. It's just, you want to sink your teeth into it. You can't avert your eyes. You dream about it at night. You're like, oh, I need that game. And for me, that was, in this gen, it was Nier Automata on PS4, which at the time was exclusive. I think they ported it to Xbox One, but no one cares. No one on Xbox was like, oh, I really hope they bring Automata. No, you just went and bought a PS4. But yeah, and I think this gen PS4 Sony, they've been a lot wetter than they've used to be. You compare, like Sony's exclusives kind of do have a stereotype where they're called nature simulators, which is single player walking sim nature simulators, which, is kind of true to an extent, I'll admit. You think about games like Horizon, The Last of Us, Nier Automata, even though it's not talked a lot about, they're all beautiful games. I played a bit of Horizon. I'll be honest with you, I didn't really enjoy it like a crazy amount. I thought it was pretty decent. It was pretty good, better than I thought actually. But going in, but the main point I was trying to get to is that it's a beautiful game. Like, it's actually stunning. I'd say more so than Automata. It's incredibly beautiful. Like, they took nature and they just made the most beautiful nature simulator and then turned it into like an archery robot game. And I do enjoy a bit of the lore in Horizon. It's just that, I don't know, there's something weird about it where I just can't bring myself to continue playing it. Like, I kind of played it, stopped, and I just left it, which is something I rarely ever do. Some people do it. I honestly am aghast at it, but this is the one game where I'm like, yeah, I played it. I don't think it's really going to go anywhere or develop in terms of story or characters, but, other games like, maybe I've already said The Last of Us. Maybe that's kind of cheating because it was on last gen, and I think they ported it to this gen. I don't know if it's an Xbox, and I don't really care because it's always a PlayStation game in my mind. It is a PlayStation 3 exclusive, right? Or it was? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But that's a very beautiful game, especially during the fall segment. That always stood out to me. But the point being, PlayStation is wet, and it's not sharing that wetness with Microsoft. Microsoft had its scale-bound canteen, and it just spilled it on the ground like a klutz. It's like, oh, we don't want this, or we don't need this anymore. I'm shaking my head. You can't see it, but I'm shaking my head. It's a shame. It's an absolute shame. I'll be honest, I wasn't really looking forward to Scalebound, but it was something different. It was something interesting. I was like, it might be good. And then they just canceled it. Sad. But yeah, the other thing is that, I'm gonna reel back. I'm gonna take some blows off Microsoft right now, because Microsoft, we've done some stumbling. We're going through the motions, and they get the message. The gamers want games, and they're kind of pumping out these indie things. And indie water is like the discount thing that kind of smells slightly like sulfur, like you got it from the natural spring, in quotations, but it smells kind of funny, kind of weird, like they're trying. But, they're making an effort, and I think we're okay. But, for all of Sony's moistness, this generation, I do have to compare it to last gen, when Sony was a desert. An absolute desert. And I think it's difficult to explain this to people who just weren't gamers back then. The meme, PS3 has no games. They think it's just a meme like, haha, that's so funny because it's not true. No, it was very, very true. In the sense that, I'll just list off some games that were Xbox exclusive at first, but as time passed, they ported them to PlayStation because it made sense. So here's some games that you might have not have known that were Xbox exclusive. Let's start with the big one, Assassin's Creed, Xbox exclusive. Number 2, Mass Effect. Yeah, think about that. And number 3, what was the third one? Oh yeah, BioShock. if you own one of these three games, or more accurately, at least one of these games from their multi-titled trilogies or series, imagine never playing that game if you own a PS3. Yeah, it's kind of scary. I think eventually those games were ported before their sequels. I think when Mass Effect 2 came out, Mass Effect was ported by then. When Assassin's Creed 2 came out, Assassin's Creed 1 was ported by then. And Bioshock Infinite, well, that just... that was obviously ported. The first one was obviously ported. I don't know about Bioshock 2. I don't know anyone who really cares about Bioshock 2. My brother played it, but it looked like just more Bioshock, but with less story, which is why I enjoyed the first one. So I was like, not for me. But point being, we have three major, I call these the new kids on the block. These were the new IPs, and they were hustling and they were bustling. And so you say, okay, well, if you didn't have those three big games, Sony did have other exclusives. Yes, they did, but for the first start of their lifespan from, 2006, 7, whenever the PS4 launched, PS3 rather, you know what they had? They had Metal Gear Solid 4, fair, and Motor Race. Or whatever it's called. It was the game where the cars went really fast and they exploded when you used the nitrous too much. Yeah, everyone remembers that, right? Yeah. So it's really funny because Nintendo had its Wii, but it had its, and the Wii, the Wii's a hard thing to talk about. It's definitely a very underpowered system. It was just like another GameCube, if not worse. But it did have some I'd say it has some very decent IP on it. And even some new stuff like, No More Heroes. Who can forget No More Heroes? I consider that a new kid on the block. And we're getting a third game soon, so that's good. But yeah, I think the Wii was pretty decent. It was pretty good. It did well. It did well enough. In that generation, 360 was king. Xbox, oof. They had all the games. They were just soaking, got everything on Xbox. But PlayStation, so, you play PS3 now, it's not so bad. But for the first few years, and it was years when the PS3 came out, you had nothing. You had Metal Gear Solid 4, and if you didn't play the Metal Gear series, that was it. You had some racing games, you had your Madden, and that's it. So you have to understand that for years, PS3 literally had nothing to play. Okay, yes, it did have games, obviously, but not the games that you actually want to play, or at least games that were on other consoles. The way I like to think about it is this. You're setting off on the next generation and everyone's got their equipment, ready to go across the desert. And while Microsoft and Nintendo are super prepared, they go to Sony and Sony says, "Where's my gear?" And they hand Sony a cup of water that says Metal Gear Solid 4 on it. And they say, "Good luck." So Sony just walked through the desert and it had that one cup of Metal Gear Solid 4 and it just held on to that. Like, it's really great, guys. They're having a great time. And eventually Microsoft was like, "Oh, I feel bad for this guy." Oh, look at him. He's like, "No, I'm fine. Soon we'll get another Final Fantasy eventually." Actually, I think 13 did come out, and 13 was okay, but it was very much isolated within the Final Fantasy community. Like, it's one of those weird games that where it came packaged with the system, but I don't know anyone who wasn't into Final Fantasy already who got into 13. I guess, personal note, I got into Final Fantasy through 10, which is still my favorite today. I wasn't a glorious 7 master race, but I've played 7 since then, original, so. But yeah, Sony was just suffering. It was suffering on the side of the road saying, oh, please. No, I'm dying, guys. I'm dying. And they had some, reparations. It had, Batman Arkham Asylum. They did this weird thing back in the day where sometimes instead of doing exclusive games, they would do exclusive content. So in the PS3 version of Arkham Asylum, you could play as the Joker or something. I don't remember clearly, but it was just this pity content that's oh man. And eventually Microsoft was like, you know what? You have a pretty decent, processor. Here's Mass Effect, here's Assassin's Creed, here's BioShock. Don't worry. It's okay. And PS3 was like, thank you. And now Sony understands people want games, and now Microsoft is kind of it's not bleeding out, but it's not doing that great. That Gears of War 5 water? Oh, that smells nasty. I don't know what you put in that, but it smells like you recycled your own piss. I don't know, man. But yeah, so, what was I going to say? So yeah, you had, Microsoft kind of swoop in and kind of save Sony, for lack of a better word. And I think if you do go and buy a PS3 today, the titles on it are very solid, I would say. But it was a very different story back in the day. And so, oh yeah, I remember what I was going to say. A lot of the leading question, of course, from that conversation is, well, why didn't the PS3 have a lot of exclusives, and why didn't it have a lot of the games that Xbox had? Was it just a contract thing? So there are actually 2 big factors to the PS3. Maybe 3 actually. One of them is economic. The PS3, well, first of all, this cycle is going to be repeated, and it's kind of, you'll get the gist of it when I talk about this, but PS2 dominated, in terms of sales at least, the last gen, the 6th gen. Personally, my favorite was the GameCube. It had all the games. Everyone had their own kind of style and their own exclusives, but PS2 did dominate that era, and a lot of people associate that era with PS2, regardless of GameCube or Xbox, but, that is what it is. But they all did exceptionally well. I'm very proud of Gen 6, and I think it was a great time. But PS2 dominated that time, Sony dominated that, and going into Gen 7, they were very arrogant, and overly assured, perhaps might be the right word, because when they launched $300 more than their competitors for the PlayStation 3. So the PlayStation 3 at launch was a very exclusive system. Not a lot of people had it because it was very, very expensive, and they did not couple a launch game, a must-have launch game to go with it. Obviously they have launch games with every system, oh, you gotta try this, but there was no big launch game except MotorStorm, which might have been at launch or right after. I think Metal Gear Solid 4 might have been just after launch, but it was you put this thing at a huge price point, you put it at a huge, it has the processor of a real PC, and it can do Blu-ray, it can do all these things, and that gets into the second point, which is that, so besides economically, that people couldn't afford PS3s, and of course they mock people for this, is that because the PS3 was designed to be so powerful and to incorporate Blu-ray discs and these multi-gigabyte games, which was a big deal back then. In the words of a technical YouTuber, the system architecture of the PlayStation 3 was very difficult to design for. So if you were a developer, it was much easier, allegedly, to develop and create something on the 360 or the Wii because they were using the same rules that they were used to. On the PlayStation 3, apparently it was much more difficult and non-intuitive to design things. So from a developer standpoint, there was actually a roadblock there. So you have a roadblock in front of your developer. You have a roadblock in front of your consumer. And I think those were the main points. I'm not sure if I'm forgetting anything else, but regardless, Sony was extremely arrogant. They made it the most... Oh yeah, that was the other thing. The fact that they could do Blu-rays. So this is also from, I guess, an economic and a development point of view, which is that, so I will say that there were some PlayStation exclusives which were extremely good and extremely long. The first one that comes to mind is a game like Folklore. Games like this have not been made and probably will not be made because this game had so much content and it was good. It was like pretty good, but it's kind of a question of, it's kind of a weird thing, but back then people didn't know how long to make games. I mean, they did kind of know, but with the PlayStation 3, that kind of limit of maybe making a game that has 60 hours of content was breached. It's like, yeah, you could do 100, maybe 200 hours of content with the size of a Blu-ray. And with that became the question, well, if we can do it, should we do it? And well, I mean, that became kind of a point of contention because just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So you had these games which were made like Folklore, where it's, lots of content, very long game. I'd say rewarding. It feels like a long book almost, with different chapters and character development. But is anyone going to buy that full price? Typically what happened back then, and still today, is that a game will come out at launch. It'll be full price, $60 back then. And then after, maybe a few months to a year, that price goes down to 50 or 40 and then 30. And just the price drop in games is incredible. Honestly, I don't know why people buy games day one unless you pre-order and you're a super, super passionate fan. But game prices just went down. So it's kind of like, yes, you can make a 60-hour single-player story experience, but what if no one buys it? What if you've dumped all this money on making this game super long and no one buys it? And you wait and the price goes down and go down and you're like, maybe they'll buy it now. And I don't know. It's a hard and a sad thing that, there's a certain amount of content you do expect from a game, but if you make way more content than we're paying for, we don't have a way to pay you or appreciate you for that. Well, actually, we do now, or was developed during that generation with the kind of advent of DLC. DLC was kind of in Gen 6, but not really. Where it's like, oh, pay 10 more bucks and you can get this add-on. And people did that. People loved it. And I still think DLC is a pretty I'm going to eat my own bloody words, but I still think it's a good thing in general, because if you have a game and you would say, hey, this is great, I want some more, you have the option to do that. The only issue now is that game companies make their DLC part of the main package. It's like, oh, you forgot, oh, you wanted a knife with your steak? You don't just want a fork? Oh, that's DLC, buddy. Yeah. Back in the day, it was different. I guess, so yeah, it's a heavy load. I wish games like Folklore were more successful. I'm trying to think of the other PS3 exclusive that was a very long game. It might have been Metal Gear Solid 4, but I'm not sure. But yeah, so you had economic to the consumer, functional to the developer, and then economic and functional to the developer again, and the studio and producer and whatever saying, well, yes, we can make a game the size of a Hollywood movie, but we can't profit off it, which is unfortunate, you know? It's like a movie producer's like, oh, well, you know, I'm going to make a 6-hour movie as soon as 6-hour movies are possible to make. And it's like, you can do that, but is it a good idea? Anyway, point being, there were a lot of issues with the PlayStation 3 at the beginning of launch, and that's where, you know, the meme comes from. PS3 has no games. Yeah, you have your Madden or whatever, and you have Metal Gear Solid 4, but that was it. And around this time, you had Mass Effect coming out, you had Assassin's Creed coming out, you had, you know, the new Zelda, Twilight Princess, you had all this cool, fun stuff, and you looked at PlayStation, and it was like an empty house. You know, and like, you know, the guy's, you know, or he's like, he's dying of thirst in the desert. He's like, are you okay? And his lips are chapped, and, you know, his eyes are gone. She's like, yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. And he's the guy who, like, strode in on his high horse saying, oh, yes, $700 for my console. It's Blu-ray. And PlayStation tried very hard to be trendy and cool and kind of non-gamer in a way. In the same way that the Wii targeted families and, like, oh, non-gamers, and they ate that up. PlayStation tried the same thing, but like, oh, it's a powerful gaming device. You know, it's not just a thing for kids. It's like, this is serious. This is serious business. And I'm the most advanced, technical, big dick technology around. And Microsoft kind of played it middle of the road, where it's like, yeah, this is Xbox, but this is Xbox cool. Like, we're for the gamers. And hilariously, I mean, that worked. You made a game console for gamers, not to make money, not to pander. You just made a good system, and it was most successful of that gen. So yeah, I would say, all in all, if you look at Gen 6, which is GameCube, Xbox, PS2, okay, well, my personal preference, I think Nintendo owned that generation. I mean, you got Wind Waker, you got Resident Evil 4, you got, I don't know if this is nostalgic, but I'm just, it's tasty. It was wet. And everyone was wet back then. Everyone was wet. Everyone was doing a very good job. And I was jealous of PlayStation. I was jealous of Microsoft. Halo. Oh my, delicious. Halo's still one of my favorite games, alongside Sonic and Legend of Zelda. Yeah, but Microsoft was super moist. I don't know what they would be without Halo. They would be nothing to me, to be honest. They do have other good games, obviously, but again, you need that killer IP. And Sony didn't really have a distinct mascot. I would say they still don't today. Some people argue Crash. When I think of PlayStation, I think of JRPGs and I guess Metal Gear, which aren't very mascot friendly, but it is what it is. But I'd say Nintendo owned that generation. I think overall PlayStation did financially well, but Nintendo's were the good games. I mean, it's hard to choose their favorite, right? But the next generation, Xbox owned Gen 7 with Halo 3 and all the hype. It was just all Xbox. It was all 360. And they did pretty well. I think the Wii did not as good as the GameCube, but it did do well. It had games like Mad World, Muramasa, and Brawl. Oh, you can't disrespect Smash. You can disrespect Smash 4 because no one bought an effing Wii U. And that was, that'll go on to the next thing. No one bought a Wii U. Nintendo almost went into obscurity, which is crazy and hilarious. Like a Lehman Brothers kind of situation. And then, once PS3 got rolling in that gen with more ports, then it kind of like, okay, all right, we saved the PlayStation. We saved it. It's going to be okay. It's not dead. And then, we get now to Gen 8, and you have PS4, 1, and Switch. And my opinion is that this generation, everything's been dry. It has been dry, like for everyone. And I don't think if you had to blame it on anything, it's, just the price of games seems to double at least every generation, or some crazy amount. Like I see it, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. So people can make risks. You're going to make a game and it might fail. You might lose $1 billion. No one's going to take that risk. So I would say, it's been dry for everyone, but it's been bad. It's been hard on Microsoft. They came out in this generation, like PlayStation, saying, oh, well, last generation, we had the gamers, we were the most successful. We're coming with their big, thick, and I mean thick Xbox One, where it's overpowered, overpriced, and yeah. And what does it have? Killer Instinct and Halo 5, I think. Gears and Gears 5. Gears 4, but Halo, that's a whole other conversation, I think. But Halo has become, jeez. It's like that kid in high school, and you see him years later, and he turned into a drug addict, and you're like, oh, yikes. Anyway, so they do have Halo. Not that that's a good thing anymore, as, rest in peace, as bad as that is to say. And so Microsoft has, they're pretty dire. I would say Sony, Sony is owning this generation, absolutely. Nintendo, again, is doing well. They're doing really well, but in a way that, similar to last gen, they decided to not compete on the same playing field as Sony and Microsoft. It's like they do their own thing, and they know they have their base, and they do keep, they do pander to their base in a good way, but they keep it tight. Nintendo's doing very well for, I guess, Nintendo standards, if that's the way to put it. Or no, I would say they're doing well in general. But I'd say Sony it's owning this generation with Bloodborne, Nier, and yes, it's ported, but and Horizon, and it just has more exclusives, and that's bottom line. And there's not anything on Xbox where I look and I'm like, oh, I wish I had that, or I wish that I did some feature besides a game. No, nothing. And Switch has done really well. I think Switch was definitely dry at the beginning. If you only have Breath of the Wild, it's a good game to last you if you want to do all the things, but that's another conversation as well about Breath of the Wild, because it's a mixed bag for me. I mean, it's a Zelda game, and it's not a Zelda game. It's definitely a good game. It's not a bad game. But it's not a game I resonated with. It was very story light and very gameplay focused, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it was one of those games where I did the shrines. I know I beat the game. I did the shrines I came across, but I didn't have a huge incentive to 100% this game like I did previous Zeldas, where I don't know, that feeling wasn't quite there. I know that's a different thing, but yeah, like when Nintendo launched, it was dry as well. It had Breath of the Wild, and if you want to argue Mario Odyssey, which I don't think is as good as 64 or Galaxy even, to be honest. And so Nintendo was pretty dry, but it's gotten better. I mean, Smash Ultimate, this is it. They've raised the bar somehow, and it is incredible. And I'm overjoyed. I'm over the moon with Smash Ultimate. I can't get enough of it. It's wonderful. Sony came out with like, we're the single player gamer experience game machine. And they have, Nier, Bloodborne, really interesting existential Lovecraftian AI death cult games. I don't know. They have like the sign-in, ooh, I'm intelligent and edgy kind of genre, and they have the gamer genre, to be honest, where it's like this slightly darker alternative to Nintendo. It's still out there and weird, but And then you have Microsoft, which is just like, bruh, Battlefield, Fortnite, yeah. So you get the point, bruh. They're bruh. So, and Nintendo, I guess they're doing Bayo 3 soon, and No More Heroes 3 is coming out, so they got some stuff. I'm gonna squeeze it. Oh yeah, and Death Stranding just came out for both systems, but it's a PS. Wait, no, is Death Stranding PS4 exclusive? I feel like it is. I should. No, okay. I will hold on. And actually, I will Google this, because if I'm wrong, I will be very embarrassed. Is it an exclusive? Oh, it's for PS4, Microsoft, Windows, which means it's a PS4 exclusive. Okay, so I'm right. So yeah, so Sony's the bomb, baby. Chad Warden, you in the wrong time, but at the right place on YouTube in 2007 when you told everyone these games are as ballin' as possible, and well, now they are. And they were back then, but now they're the main ballers on the street. Everyone was balling back then, but now they're the main baller. Yeah, but I guess that's my take on the current state of video games as we enter the year of our Lord 2020. That everyone's done pretty well. We've all had our faults, our struggles, our dips. Microsoft with the Xbox One, Sony with the PlayStation 3, and Nintendo with the Wii U. So we've all had our stumbles, and we've had Google come in, and Amazon apparently is developing their own Stadia, basically trying to be like, hey, we know what we're doing, and they get BTFO'd, and I'm very happy for that. I'm very happy that the corporate juggernauts who just see a dollar sign and not an industry and opportunity for creativity get sent packing. And yeah, and no matter who you are, just remember, enjoy the games you play. But yeah, Take care, guys.